People who need help with matters that can't be explained come to me. These hauntings, I've faced many evils in my life. The haunted house. If we can find out what it is.
The world of the Insidious franchise has always lived in the unsettling space between memory and terror, where the shadows of the past never stay quiet, and the unseen forces lurking in forgotten corners learn to speak with chilling clarity. When this chapter arrived, it carried the weight of a life spent chasing the supernatural, and it leaned deeply into the one thing the series had brushed against for years, but never fully confronted the inner world of a woman who spent her entire life fighting monsters in houses that didn't belong to her, only to be forced back into the one place she never wanted to see again. There is something hauntingly poetic in watching someone who has guided countless families through the darkness finally step into her own buried nightmares, a reminder that even the strongest spirit hunters can be shattered by echoes that refuse to die. From the opening moments, the tone feels different, as if the corridors of this story have been carved from older memories, not just rooms plagued by restless spirits. The sense of dread doesn't come from jump scares alone, but from the way the narrative slowly tightens around a childhood shaped by fear, isolation, and unexplained horrors that shaped a lifetime of intuition. The air feels thick with unresolved anguish, and every corner of the old house breathes with a kind of sorrow that was never exorcised. Instead of focusing on new hauntings, this journey reaches backward, sinking into the psychology of a life defined by second sight, where the lines between cursed and destined blur into something far more tragic. What makes this chapter especially compelling is how it turns its attention away from the typical structure of exploring a new location and instead binds the entire atmosphere to personal history. The rooms hold stories that were never told. The basement holds silences that pulse like old wounds, and the walls seem to remember more than any human could. Every memory that resurfaces is tinged with a sense of guilt and loss, as if the past has been waiting for decades for someone to return and confront the twisted remnants still hiding in the shadows. The emotional weight deepens the suspense, creating a blend of psychological terror and supernatural confrontation that hits differently from the earlier entries. Throughout this haunting return, the film weaves themes of trauma, responsibility, and the terrifying decisions people make when they are blinded by fear. It paints a portrait of a childhood shaped not only by a terrifying ability, but also by a household where doubt, disbelief, and anger formed an invisible cage. The chilling experiences of youth become stepping stones to a life spent helping others escape the same horrors she once survived. Yet the story asks the uncomfortable question of whether anyone can truly outrun what shaped them. The deeper she goes into the house, the more it feels like the house is studying her, remembering her, waiting for her. The unsettling energy builds steadily as familiar elements from past chapters appear like whispers from the future, tying the entire mythology together in unexpected ways. The idea that certain entities linger across timelines, watching and waiting, enhances the tension with each step. Every door that creaks open feels like an invitation from something patient and hungry. Every shadow stretching across the floor suggests the presence of forces that have been growing stronger in the absence of attention. Instead of relying on sudden frights, the sense of horror emerges from how the environment reacts to the presence of someone it has been anticipating for years. One of the most compelling aspects is how the story gives shape to the emotional scars left behind. The sensations of being unwanted, misunderstood, and feared by those closest to her create a narrative backbone thicker than any spectral threat. The story conveys how trauma can echo across lifetimes when unresolved, and how returning to a place of pain can feel like stepping into a nightmare, frozen in time. The supernatural disturbances become metaphors for emotional scars, unseen, persistent, and capable of manifesting in destructive ways when ignored. When she begins to regain fragments of memory, each one feels like a key turning inside a lock that has rusted shut for decades. Layers of mystery unfold with a rhythm that keeps the audience tense as the line between memory and haunting becomes harder to define. The old house becomes a labyrinth of reawakened fears, where every object carries the weight of a childhood moment turned monstrous. The atmosphere is alive with a quiet malevolence, as though the walls themselves resent the intrusion. Strange sounds echo down hallways with too much intention to be accidental, and each room seems to hide the imprint of something unspeakable. The home transforms into a symbolic battlefield where the demons of the past gather for one final reckoning. What elevates this chapter is the way it shifts its attention to personal confrontation rather than external battles. Instead of focusing solely on helping strangers, the story becomes a journey inward, forcing her to confront the truth she didn't want to remember. The idea that her most terrifying case would be the one embedded in her own childhood offers a depth that few horror films dare to explore. The tension grows not from the presence of evil, but from the realization that some terrors take root long before we understand them, and they continue to grow until they are faced. The unfolding events gradually reveal the painful reality of a life tied to a gift that felt more like a curse. Memories of warnings ignored, abilities punished, and innocence misunderstood give emotional weight to every step deeper into the house. Yet, even as she uncovers layers of long-hidden truth, the story frames her as someone shaped by resilience rather than fear. The film emphasizes that darkness does not always corrupt. Sometimes it shapes protectors, carving strength from suffering. When the supernatural force finally emerges in its full form, it feels like something that has been feeding on decades of silence and buried guilt. Tension tightens through the exploration of secret rooms and hidden spaces that seem designed to trap not just the body but the mind. The house reveals itself like a twisted memory palace, filled with echoes of footsteps, whispers traveling through vents, and doors that open on their own as though compelled by something deeply personal. The journey through these spaces becomes a confrontation with ghosts, both literal and emotional, and the connection between these layers heightens the stakes. Moments of silence become just as frightening as moments of chaos, the quiet filled with the anticipation of what lies just out of sight. One of the strongest emotional threads revolves around the idea of regret and unfinished stories. The film dives into questions of forgiveness of others and of oneself. The notion that the past cannot be changed but can be reclaimed becomes deeply meaningful as the truth behind certain childhood events comes to light. When real human cruelty intertwines with supernatural malevolence, the horror becomes more grounded, more disturbing, and more resonant. It reminds the audience that some of the darkest monsters are those still living, and that sometimes the spirits haunting a place aren't the only things hiding in the dark. As the narrative pushes toward its climax, everything becomes sharper, more intense, and more devastatingly personal. The unexpected connections between this chapter and previous entries help redefine earlier moments from the franchise in ways that feel meaningful and deliberate. Each revelation feels like a missing puzzle piece sliding into place, not only enriching the mythology, but giving emotional clarity to decisions made long before. Touches of familiarity appear not as fan service, but as emotional anchors, tying the past and future of the series into a single spine of storytelling. The confrontation with the central entity becomes more than a battle of good versus evil. It becomes a battle of acceptance versus fear, truth versus memory, strength versus brokenness. The supernatural force embodies the darkest parts of her past, turning the final struggle into something symbolic as much as physical. The sense of victory becomes complicated, layered with sorrow and healing, reminding viewers that even in triumph, scars linger. Yet, those scars also tell the story of survival. By the end, the emotional journey stands just as tall as the supernatural one. The echoes of childhood trauma, the silence of buried truths, and the resilience required to face both inner and outer demons come together in a way that feels both heartbreaking and cathartic. It becomes a chapter that closes one door in the universe while unlocking several more, creating a bridge between past and present that deepens the entire franchise. The lingering imagery stays with the audience long after the screen fades, reminding them that some keys unlock more than rooms, they unlock memories, courage, and the unspoken places where fear learns to hide. It is this intimate connection between fear and memory, between the supernatural world and the emotional world, that gives this story its lasting power. Instead of offering simple scares, it offers a journey through the places we bury parts of ourselves, only to discover that those same places can shape who we become. By the time the final moments arrive, there is a sense of closure mixed with quiet sorrow, a recognition that some stories end not with triumph or defeat, but with understanding. And in a franchise built on fear, this chapter stands out for embracing vulnerability as its most haunting weapon.